Escape from Tarkov is one of a kind. What began as a simple game to fund another project has evolved into one of the most complex, addictive, and genre-defining first-person shooters out there, despite being in early access to this day. However, as time went by, some changes were made to the game due to community pressure and cheaters, and lacking some features that I feel would make this a truly great game. In this video, I'm not going to suggest anything complicated, or say some frequently asked things like fix optimization, fix anti-cheat, fix servers, fix AI, or anything that's been quote-unquote planned by the devs, but rather give some ideas that I believe would benefit the game as a whole, in terms of fun and realism. So, let's begin. Even after a fresh wipe, there are still cases of unstable pings in Tarkov, and one way to fix it is by using Gear Up Game Booster. Streamer servers for everyone. Oftentimes in video games, it only seems like each continent has one big server, such as the EU, NA, or RUS server, but that's not entirely true. The game will randomly assign users to different sub-servers, such as one of the EU West servers, which may be far away from your place if you happen to be living in Eastern Europe, for example. This means you will not always get an optimal internet connection to the game server. Gear Up ensures the best and most stable sub-server when connecting to any EU servers with a single click. Gear Up also has a similar system for the entire continent of North America and Asia. Activating Gear Up Booster on Escape from Tarkov shows noticeably better ping than any EU server that I have tried. You can see some footage here of me trying a few different raids, and as we all know from Escape from Tarkov, every millisecond counts if you don't want to get head eyes from a guy who was seemingly behind cover. When Gear Up connects you to a server, it ensures that you have a latency-free and a more stable ping experience, reducing ping spikes, especially during peak times when there's a wipe in Tarkov. It can also optimize the network connections of people who suffer from bad network infrastructure. And don't worry, Nikira won't come knocking on your door at night with his banhammer, as it's completely safe to use.
Alright.
You can try Gear Up for free by clicking the link in my description or in the pinned comment. Thank you Gear Up Game Booster for sponsoring this video. Despite being a 7-year-old game, Tarkov is visually stunning. It has photorealistic graphics with some of the most detailed maps like Streets of Tarkov. However, at times, the game looks dull, washed out and gloomy, as if ambient lighting doesn't exist in this world, and no post-effect settings or any third-party software will ever fix that. This room, for example, has a couple of windows as a light source, but it doesn't light up the room well enough as it should, while there's also a sort of vintage filter all over the screen which cannot be disabled using post-effects. That makes dark rooms and shadows a bit darker than it needs to. There are many other areas in the game that appears brighter or darker like that as a result. Let's not talk about interchanges lighting. Many people already know that map looks really contrasted. The building has so many skylights, and yet it's so dark during the daytime, as if the game has some sort of black filter all over it that cannot be disabled. Some people might think, so what, just use a flashlight, or just turn up the gamma in the Nvidia control panel. This simply proves that the lighting in this game is poorly done. Now picture this. You load into woods at 10 AM with a scope SVD-40 and you get up on top of the rock that's on the northern side of the lumber mill. You drop your backpack, lay down and take aim towards the spine rock. The visibility is bad, but there's a PMC in your field of vision. Can you see it? The distant shadows in broad daylight looks absolutely pitch black, as if it's a portal to the shadow realm, which is probably a result of poorly adjusted fog. There are many dark spots like this where players can hide and take you by surprise, even in plain sight, if they wear any dark gear. Removing this fog from the shadows would not only make the game look better, but also make camping more difficult, because people sitting in dark corners and bushes would be easier to spot and would encourage them to change positions more often, as they would be more likely to be spotted if they stayed in the same spot. Instead of justifying the rat tactics on social media,
to break a man's will, to break his spirit, you have to break his mind. Men have this idea that we can fight with dignity, that there's a proper way to kill someone. It's absurd. It's anesthetic. We needed to endure the bloody horror of murder. You must destroy that idea. Show him what a messy, terrible thing it is to kill a man.
There should be much less fog inside and outside in general. Not only it looks unnatural, it also cripples your ability to do long-range sniping and make the already underused high-powered optics even more useless. In clear weather, the only place you can spot fog in real life is in the distant horizon, unless it's a rainy or humid weather, or you live in a place that suffers from heavy air pollution. Sure, at times it makes the game look super atmospheric, but it looks so weird that it's always this fog. And it's also the reason people are discouraged from using glasses, because they make your head stick out like a sore thumb. Some of you might say, but fog is supposed to improve performance. And no, it absolutely doesn't. It only covers low detail objects in the distance, so it doesn't look obvious. I'm not saying remove fog altogether, but make it much less widespread. My last complaint about the graphics is the bloom. Please give us the option to disable it or turn down its intensity. It should be a standard feature, as bloom is one of the most hated post-processing effects in almost every game, because of how over-exaggerated and blinding it usually is, instead of being subtle. For a hardcore shooter, the gunplay lacks proper feedback and punch. And by punch, I mean... Something I feel like the game is sorely missing out on, as the main draw of Tarkov's combat for me has always been the raw violence of a gunfight. With the blood shooting out and the body parts blown and disfigured, these would add that bit of weight that the game is missing to feel truly gritty and immersive enough to give you PTSD. To keep it sensible, the gun would be limited to shotgun rounds, high caliber rounds, and direct impact explosions from grenade launchers. And the chance of it happening would be dependent on the ammo's fragmentation chance. On top of that, the visors could get blood all over them if you killed an enemy up close, requiring you to wipe your visors every now and then. When you get shot in the head through a visor, some blood would also splatter on the inside of your visor, making dying that much more brutal with face shields. And if you picked up the helmet with a visor off of a player that got shot in the head with it, there would be some blood splatter on the overlay. current recoil system contradicts everything about realistic weapon handling. Your PMC shoots every gun as if it's missing a stock. The muzzle of the weapon always bounces up and the iron sights become borderline unusable at the first couple of shots. But after a while, it automatically starts compensating the recoil for you. It makes single fire and burst firing absurdly difficult and encourages you to spray and pray in most cases. Weapon recoil is more realistic when full auto firing becomes more and more uncontrollable per shot and relies on the player's killer input to control it, instead of it being auto-compensated. It's a more traditional way of handling weapon recoil, but it is miles better than what Tarkov has currently. It is harder to control than you would think, but in most cases, semi-auto and burst firing would outperform full auto while also making point firing less powerful. To further discourage the use of full auto fire, you would lose arm stamina at a faster rate when firing. The higher the ergo, the slower the arm stamina drain is during sustained firing. To prevent recoil reducing attachments from turning your guns into absolute laser beams, we need to make their stats multiplicative rather than additive, which in the simplest of terms would effectively shorten the gap between a lightly modded weapon and a fully modded weapon, by reducing the effectiveness of stacking multiple attachments. The devs really need to add more variable zoomings to scopes that have the ability to adjust zooming levels instead of just having two modes. It would make so many high magnification scopes actually usable and not limited to longer ranges, not to mention the fact that almost every decent FPS games has this feature. It also needs the ability to let us fine-tune the mouse sensitivity for its zoom level for some added precision. Now, I understand that some scopes like the Voodoo and Vortex would become more powerful, since you can instantly switch between zoom levels, and that we made the graphics cleaner in the first chapter of this video. So how can we balance it? One way is to add a little animation when adjusting the zoom levels on your scope that's not too slow or too fast. The other way to balance it is to ban the high power scopes from the flea market and make them found in raid only, so that the people who play the game less frequently have an equal chance of acquiring them compared to those who play Tarkov religiously, and perhaps increase the spawn chances of them a tiny bit as well, so people can actually find them. Next up is the ability to switch to Ironsights when using side-mounted or dovetail style optics like the PU scopes or PSO scopes. Some realistic shooters like Red Orchestra 2 and DayZ have this feature, and it does the job pretty well. The scope might cover some part of your screen, but it's better than trying to point fire with a mouse in, for example. It would make these kind of scopes more viable at close quarters combat, instead of buying an expensive scope with a backup red dot sight on top of it. Speaking of, the Spectre scope still doesn't accept any red dot sights. BSG, please fix. You can already technically do so with a weapon rifle, but it requires a small red dot sight to do so. I tried to do the same with the SVD, but had no luck. Although if you use a USP1 scope, it kind of works. But I wish you could do this with just iron sights. Moving on, there is a small exploit in the game that lets you ADS without decreasing your FOV. I'm sure most of you have heard the phrase, "It's not a bug, it's a feature," and this no FOV zoom should be one of those as an optional setting. The only drawback to it is that it's harder to pinpoint targets at a distance with something like a scope, but honestly, it looks more immersive that way, and it looks especially great on pistols. If you were holding down shift this way, it would zoom in on your camera like usual to help you aim. But overall, it makes aiming down sights feel smoother and would be a fantastic option for those who find FOV zooms jarring. There aren't many disadvantages when it comes to using face shields and night vision goggles right now. The face shield's only drawbacks are a smudged plexiglass overlay or a narrow field of view, and NVGs are simply more sensitive to bright lights. People using these often have a much better chance of surviving raid. Let's start with face shields. In reality, it is physically impossible to aim down sights with face shields on unless you use a pistol, a folded or stockless gun, or a gun with special stocks. It is crazy that Killa is so accurate with his Meska helmet's visor down, even though you can barely see through that thing. What I'm suggesting is that face shields would block ADS if the weapon has a stock that isn't folded, so stockless or folded weapons and pistols would allow ADS. This way you can decide for yourself if you want some extra protection or precision. Regarding NVGs, with some exceptions like the PVS-14, it's difficult to aim down your scopes on your weapon because of the goggles themselves, and even if you could, you wouldn't be able to get a clear picture. Since we also removed most of the fog in the first chapter of this video, NVGs should block ADS if the sight you're using is a magnified optic. Similar to the face shield nerf, instead of ADSing, you will point fire instead to help you aim with the assistance of lasers or canted sights. This change would not only make IR lasers, canted sights and night vision scopes more useful, but also enhance the tactical feeling that the developers are aiming for. One thing that discourages PvP and looting in general is that the game punishes you by making you overweight prematurely. The problem with the current weight system is that it starts off too strong, even with a relatively medium gear. The way it could work instead is that the amount of penalties should gradually build up the heavier you get, while still brutally punishing you for heavy looting. One extra penalty that BSG could add in the overweight zone is to make pro movement block stamina regain, because crawling can be quite exhausting, especially with over 30 kilos of loot on your back. To further improve the weight system, the devs could finally implement that gear comfort mechanic for backpacks, at least. A feature in which backpacks has a comfort value, which slightly reduces the weight of items contained inside. It would apply to each bag with different stats. The comfort stat would not reduce the weight of the bag itself, but only the items it contains. This change would ultimately punish players wearing heavy gear, rather than those scavenging for loot, in a looter shooter. This one is for the dead gamer with 7 children, the standard edition users, and everyone in the early stages of wipe. A collection of small cases and containers that are cheaper and smaller alternatives to bigger containers, helping you better organize your stash in the first month of a wipe. Instead of saving up for a scav junk box, you could buy a toolbox that can only store tools and parts for a fraction of the price. You could also buy a small ammo pouch, a mech pouch, a medicine pouch, or a cute little lunchbox, which could be sold or bartered by level 1 or 2 traders. Now sounds more like a TV commercial than a suggestion, but you get my point. Now let's discuss some quality of life suggestions. As of making this video, there are currently 164 different ammunitions in the game with many different stats. Holy wee. But the two most important factors for everyone are damage and penetration. However, these stats are not shown in game, and newer players have no idea if the ammo is worth using or not. Even the descriptions of these ammos don't tell much and only confuse new players even more. They would have to look up ammo guides on YouTube, look up different ammo types on the Tarkov wiki, or look at a dozen other ammo charts from different websites, or the one posted by the devs themselves. In my opinion, showing damage and penetration in the in-game ammo stats is a lot more important than bleed chance, for example. Alternatively, based on the penetration value, the ammo stats could indicate which armor class it is most effective against. If it has a penetration value of, say, 37, rounded up to 40, which means it is effective against class 4 armor. The in-game map system is completely redundant, since you can simply look up third-party maps on Google. People who play for immersion, or even newer players who don't know the maps, can't even use the in-game option properly, because it requires giving up a valuable slot in your secure container, since you can't put them in the special slots. Instead, they pull up a third-party map on their phone or a secondary monitor, if they had one. Putting the maps in the special slots would at least make them somewhat viable. We could make these two items a bit more interesting by being able to unpack them in your stash. Unpacking a bag of MRE could give you up to 7 food-related items that are randomly selected, because there's a lot more than crackers in an MRE, believe it or not. It would work the same way for tool sets, giving you up to 5 random tool items. It would grant you another option for acquiring these items if you ever decide to unpack them, instead of selling them on the flea market or getting them for some early quests. Most small and low value barter items should have the ability to be stacked together. It makes no sense that most of these smaller items take up as much space as a tank battery or an electric motor, for example. And most people rarely loot that many of these items anyway, unless they specifically need them for quests, hideout upgrades, or to fill space around their actual valuable loot in raids, until they find something more valuable. They should stack up to 3 times, so it's reasonably balanced. But anything that's worth a damn, like a GP coin, VPX, LEDX, should be stackable only in your stash. This change would help you save some space, especially for those who only have the standard edition of the game. An optional tooltip when hovering your mouse over weapon mods in the weapon building screen could show a quick overview of relevant stats and comparisons. This would allow you to quickly discern which mods are better for your build and compare other mods faster than eyeballing the info stats. Hovering over a weapon mod in the menu would show a comparison of that mod and the mod already on the weapon. And holding Control would switch between the comparison and stats view. While we're on the modding screen, we could say goodbye to the lower part of the info stats, as they're irrelevant when it comes to modding and would free up some screen space. Lastly, an optional setting that adds more checkmarks and more detailed tooltips to items, to indicate if they are needed for hideout upgrades or if they are on your wishlist. It would also show a tooltip with the list of modules the item is needed for, when your cursor hovers over the checkmark. This feature would help people find wishlisted items in raids, check if the items are needed for something, and spend less time alt-tabbing out of the game looking for the items they actually need. Many people complain at the early stages of a wipe and too fast, and run into players who are already armed to the teeth with the best gear. Anyone who is really committed to the game is already over level 40, has the stash of a late wipe Chad, and has already got cap like 2 weeks into the wipe, which is mind-boggling. Until we actually get in-raid traders like Lightkeeper, I believe that putting a time gate on every quest that is divided into several parts, such as the Punisher, Chemical or Test Drive, would be a decent placeholder that would truly prolong the early and mid stages of every wipe, and casual players would be able to catch up to the chads who play this game around the clock. There's already a time gate on some parts of the Gunsmith questline, but honestly, all parts of it should be affected by this change. I'm not asking for a 24-hour or a 12-hour time gate. I'm asking for a minimum of 6-hour time gate at the very least. See if people would prefer this change over running into landmark wannabe number 6969 on the third day of the wipe, who also already unlocked the flea market and next level traders. If you have a better idea for prolonging every wipe, then please share it in the comment section. And that's everything on my wishlist. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for your attention. I just wanna say that I'm not a game designer, nor do I control BSG's action. I'm just an avid Tarkov fan who wants to see this game succeed, despite all the issues it has. Perhaps I expect too much from BSG, knowing their track record and their dislike towards offline Tarkov.
You and your team don't like the single-player Tarkov version with like mods and stuff. But are you still like looking at some of them like for inspiration, or like just maybe even to hire some developers? Because like I saw some videos with like really great mods, like I don't know, Recoil wise or something like that. So do you still maybe get inspired by mods?
I saw a lot of things over there too. I really saw that videos, and the thing is, you can make everything offline. But in our game, it's like it's so complicated to add any feature, especially which related to online and networking. It's pretty hard. Of course, there are features that doesn't need, like the online aspect is doesn't need it, but still, we have our own plans. And of course, when people see that somebody made something, and it feels like he's way better than us.